Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our Malicious Compliance. In today's episode, My Father versus the Homeowners Association. The director of IT tries to overstep and abuse her power, and it ends up deleting our only copy of our computer image. The fence is wider on the other side. All flora must be HOA approved. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. My Father versus the Homeowners Association. I'm a little fuzzy on exactly when this was, but for loose context, it's 2018-ish. We're living in this little two-story in a subdivision in upstate South Carolina, which my parents still own. My family just had a full run of renovations done on the house: kitchen remodel, new floors, wallpaper removed, new paint on the walls, etc. The folks who painted did an especially good job, and since they were a small, local business, they wanted to know if they could put a little sign in our yard for a few days as advertisement, you know, those little plastic type yard signs, nothing big or fancy. My dad was happy to oblige, and showed them where to put it to avoid the sprinkler system. Everything's great. 2 days later, a letter arrives in our mailbox. It's from the HOA, Homeowners Association. According to the bylaws, no signage can be placed in a yard for more than 24 hours. We hadn't been planning to leave it up more than a few days, maybe a week at the most, but to be told that supporting a small business was an eyesore came well out of left field. This is the part where I tell you that my father, despite being a very considerate and respectful man, has something of a problem with authority, especially when that authority is arbitrarily telling him what to do on his own property. First thing he does is pull out his copy of the neighborhood bylaws. He and my mother both look over it, and lo and behold, the quoted passage does indeed state that no signage or similar mode of advertisement is to be displayed in a yard for more than 24 hours. Not one to go down quietly, my father took to combing through the applicable section, looking for any loophole he could find. And he found it in the word yard. 2 or 3 days after that, one of the ladies who work for the HOA came down to our house to personally ask us to remove the sign. She and my dad stepped out on the front porch, and must have been out there for nearly half an hour. I don't think I heard him say anything other than the occasional "uh-huh" or "yes ma'am" until the very end. See, the sign was no longer in our yard, it was in the flower bed. Other parts of the bylaws, even in the cited section, distinguish the flower bed as separate from the yard, and since this particular clause mentioned the yard alone, the flower bed must have been fair game. And he told this, honestly quite nice, woman as much, without so much as knitting his brows or raising his voice. The sign stayed in our flower bed, perhaps out of spite, for nearly another month before we finally took it down. The director of IT tries to overstep and abuse her power, and it ends up deleting our only copy of our computer image. Just to clarify, this was the IT director at a government agency, basically meaning manager. It is not about the director of the movie. This happened around 2010. I work in IT for a state agency. Since it's government, our leadership positions are mostly appointed by the governor, rather than being promoted from within. As a result, we had a director of IT who knew nothing about IT. We'll call her Karen. Karen came from a completely different unit, and due to a union dispute over a hostile work environment, she was reassigned to our unit, rather than fired. This frequently happens with appointees. They do not like to fire them because it makes the governor look bad. Unsurprisingly, the unit began going downhill after she took over, because she was extremely emotional and tried to micromanage everything. My normal job duties involve computer repair and networking, covering multiple offices. I volunteered to help the main capital office create our computer software image, naively thinking it would help me get promoted, but all in all it was just tedious and was starting to cause me to fall behind in my normal duties. I had been working on the image for about 6 months, updating it when needed. Asterisk for those who aren't IT savvy, an image is a snapshot of the computer hard drive, fully loaded with all of the drivers and software already installed. To do this manually would take 4 to 5 hours on every computer, whereas using an image would take about 40 minutes, asterisk. We work very standard hours, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. On Thursday at 4 p.m., we get an urgent message from Karen, stating that we all must report to the main office Friday morning at 9 a.m. and to bring our USB drives. We were told that if we didn't bring the flash drives, we would be sent back to go get them. She didn't say why. Obviously, I wasn't happy about how unprofessional it was to give such little notice about a meeting that requires a 2-hour drive one way and to reschedule my entire day of meetings for PC repairs. I called some associates worked in our main office to find out what was going on. Apparently Karen had convinced herself that IT support might have bad stuff on the drives, completely on a whim, mind you, they didn't have software to track it. The plan was to collect all flash drives, wipe them and then give them back, without telling us. The sheer stupidity of this idea was off the charts, considering we kept all of our important troubleshooting tools on there plus the image. Since I did the imaging, my flash drive had all of the source files for the image. All of our software, drivers, multiple versions of Windows, along with the complete documentation of how to set it all up. We had no backup policy, but I did keep a personal backup of the drive. Cue malicious compliance. I was not happy about how Karen did not tell us what was being done or why. I deleted my personal backup and decided to just play dumb and came to the meeting and turned in the drive. Surely, they would be smart enough to say something, anything, before doing this, but nope. Sure enough, they were wiped without our consent or knowledge and then given back to us. A few weeks go by and they ask me about how things are going with the image. I simply tell them that it's been erased by Karen without my knowledge, so unfortunately, there was nothing I could do, and I'm not about to recreate it all from scratch. Most of IT support lost their copies as well during that meeting and all the networking team had was a backup from years ago before I took over. Honestly, at this point I was sick of volunteering my time for nothing in the main office, and it was making my normal job much harder, so I was happy to wash my hands of that. Needless to say, Karen was pissed, but she couldn't do a thing about it, since it is their job to create backups and manage them, not mine. They had to recreate the image and documentation completely from scratch, dozens of hours of work. Karen was eventually reassigned to another unit and things got better in IT after that. I'm kind of like a folk hero in that agency now. Everyone was very happy to have Karen gone. The fence is wider on the other side. This story is something my mother did when they moved into the home they live in now. Where they moved to was a commercial apartment/condo place with an HOA. To paint the picture, this place has large 6-house condo buildings that were all the same and standard 8-home apartment buildings. All the rent-to-own condos have a porch area in the back that lead to a parking lot. Some of which my mother noticed has fences. My mother handled mostly all of the getting the house ready and dealing with the HOA. She learned pretty quick that you had to get permission to do just about anything here. So after we moved in, she sent in a request to put in a privacy fence, like many of the others in the area. With the HOA's approval and guild lines, she finds a contractor, which she discovered was an old childhood friend, surprise, and has the fence put in. KHOA. My mom submits the contractor's document stating the kind of fence and color and specs only for her to receive a letter stating her fence needs to be removed due to not meeting HOA standards. Their reasoning, the technical term for the color white of the fence doesn't match what they allow. Best example would be they allow paper white, but it was labeled eggshell. They stated they would fine my mother for every day the fence stood. My mother attempted to explain that the specific brand only used that white. To get the other white you had use a different, more expensive fence brand. My mother was peeved to say the least. She went as far to take pictures of all the fences hers included and demanded the HOA distinguish which was hers at a monthly meeting. They couldn't but still didn't care, the paperwork didn't match. Thankfully she had a friend in the contractor. She called him back and spoke with him about what the HOA said, and they hatched their plan. My mother and the contractor pull up the fence and the HOA watch as it's taken away in a day. The next day the same fence comes back and gets put in again, this time the paperwork says, paper white. It's been years and my mother still has the same fence, the HOA never said anything farther. Those fees were never paid but it's fine, my mom doesn't use the pool anyway. All flora must be HOA approved. I used to live in a suburban neighborhood. The houses cost a tiny bit more than the next neighborhood, so the people on the board/neighborhood volunteers thought they were better than everybody. They did things like adding a gate, which nobody wanted, to keep out the non-existent burglars. If you wanted to plant anything in your yard, you needed approval. Write it up, submit it, wait for the stamp. They could make you tear your landscaping out if you didn't. One resident didn't like this, and submitted a form with all the plants they requested to cultivate. It was a long list of the specific names, the Latin names, of a bunch of weeds and invasive species. It was approved. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.